Hi guys, this is Magical Peach Internet 138 Franga, however you want to call me here, and I just finished watching season 1 of Disenchantment, and I was surveying some of the reactions to the show, and I noticed that a lot of people who have come out and spoken about it haven't really liked it, which, as they're comparing it to Futurama and The Simpsons, even if some of the staff from Futurama and The Simpsons are working on the show right now, I have to say that I loved it. I also saw people who did love it were mentioning it mostly through Twitter. So I just wanted to give some of my interpretation of it, probably because, as you all have noticed from some of my work, I am really into fairy tales and looking at princess cultures of the past and present. And comparing it with Disenchantment, it's actually a lot smarter and funnier if you really look at. It's not lampshading fairy tale tropes exactly, but how historically princesses have been portrayed and also deconstructing some of the archetypes of their stories. Now, let's start with Bean. She is shown to want a different life, or at least have some agency over her life. She is an alcoholic, she is a gambler, and she's constantly seen fighting with her dad, as a 19-year-old would do. She was seen getting married off for political reasons, which, even in the world of princesses in history, she's around the right age. Sometimes they were married off at 2 as like the youngest, if it's a boy or girl. Sometimes maybe up to like 19 or into their 20s, usually in like their mid-teens. And she has a right to not want to marry this person who she's probably only met, and even then it's mostly through correspondence with her parents, or most specifically Zog. And yes, a little running joke about the husband and wife being brother and sister from the other kingdom. Yes, that is true. Usually, some families would intermarry cousins or brother and sister to keep, quote unquote, the bloodlines pure with royal blood, which usually led to more problems than what it's worth. And all the fact that Bean isn't technically a roundabout archetype, she doesn't know exactly what she wants to do. She just doesn't want to be a princess, and it's shown that Zog has barely raised her. I mean, barely. Honestly, he leaves her alone most of the time. He knows that she constantly sneaks out, but it seems as if she mentioned that Bunty, her handmaid, is the one that raised her, not an actual governess, and certainly not Una. Since it seems like as soon as he got married to Una, they had Derek and focused more raising him, because Derek, while being sheltered since he is the male heir, which of course if you look through a lot of mythology and historically, that male heir is what you needed. Bean was originally the heir, and he became technically the spare, so it's the heir and the spare, and that's it, or at least multiple children. And now as a male, he immediately surpasses her. And of course now Bean, as you would think about it, she has no stake to a kingdom. She has a choice of either getting married or, as they happen in the 5th episode, being sent to a convent, because that, as a higher noble lady, was one of them seen as quote unquote the most noble things to do if you're not going to get married. Not just because she threw a wild house party. Plus the fact that they apparently don't have a distinct god in this realm, since they're still trying to figure out what's going on. She doesn't know what they're worshiping, which ties into the joke. And the fact that she has a demon means that there's a very loose concept of Christianity, or at least of any type of religion. It's not really clarified where they live in Dreamland, but at least from some of the sports in the season finale that Zog was playing in the background, I think they might be Irish or Scottish. All I know is that there are a lot of people wearing kilts, so I know that they're very medieval, or they could be invading from Britain, considering that Dagmar has a British accent and is mentioned to be a visiting nobleman's daughter. And if we look at her, yes, she's an action princess, but she never really pursues it to go on adventures unless it pursues her. She doesn't go on any crusades, and she's very creeped out by one of the guards constantly hitting on her, which says that Bean knows what she's looking for in a relationship, but she also is interested in meaningless sex. Maybe even having that turn into an understanding boyfriend who knows what's going on with her life. And let's see, what else can we talk about? The fact that, of course, stereotypically, she does not feel comfortable in the dresses, or being in a corset. And if you look at some British royalty, like Princess Charlotte, who actually died in childbirth because it's constantly inbreeding and her father wanting that male heir. She had like 3 other sisters, and and she loved sex, like a lot of indecent sex, and was a wild child, and the entire kingdom loved her up into her dying breath. And she and her husband ended up falling in love with each other. So Bean's archetype, while if you think about like fairy tale princesses, it breaks that, but she's also a reflection of medieval actual princesses throughout history, especially in British times. And of course, they also did love drinking and gambling, like so much gambling. Just a lot of times she would get in debt, and even then, Bean, if she's not a princess, she could still be a duchess and live in her own house away from her father. If she was married off to someone else, and she could still have some political pull if that was what she wanted. It's been shown that she is not really given much to do around the castle. Her father has literally said all she's asked her to do is stay sober and to sit in a chair all day for processions. Since Bean also has never had an actual job until maybe the fifth or sixth episode, when she was kicked out of the manor, she doesn't really have much to do. She's not shown sewing, she's not shown cooking or any of the stereotypical Disney princess stuff, or anything else that would be highly valued in fairy tales, which is good. Which shows that her alcoholism was more of a matter of time. So she mentioned she was raised by essentially Bunty and guys in a bar. She was probably taught to drink at a very young age, and that's what you do to cope with not knowing what you want to do with your life. Plus, even when she goes out, she may do little tiny errands, but not enough to really sustain herself. And we've seen that she has an interest in being an ambassador, and she was very good at it, and a diplomat. So King Zog could honestly give her some training to do that. But everybody's looking down at her for her gender. So if she really wanted this to happen, she would have to work toward it, not just go back to the bottle. The sad thing is, in like the one episode where she found something she was really good at, probably because Lucy realized he needed to corrupt her more, she got yelled at for something that wasn't even her fault because she was drugged or given like Dankmeyer shots for really no reason. And her father, up until this point, probably believes that she got drunk on purpose and she was trying to stay sober, and she seemed to actually have a knack for writing stuff on the fly. So while she has that stereotypical, you know how all the girls in a bunch of media may have an interest in writing, somehow want to work for a big newspaper, which is good, or be just a journalist or work for a magazine or freelancing. She definitely has that gift, but it's never touched upon. And all of these good things about herself are rarely talked about except for by Elpho, which we've seen that she's kind, but she's brash. And she realistically looks at the world, but she wants to actually have hope and something to do with her life. Bean is pretty cool. She's a deconstruction of the unsympathetic comical protagonist, where she is constantly called out on her faults, and she seeks to at least improve herself in some odd way. And then we get to Elpho. Elpho and Lucy, both of them are supposed to be kind of second halves. Elpho, they're both the protagonist sidekicks. Elpho being a magical woodland creature who's supposed to show her the good side of life. And Lucy is supposed to be a deconstruction of the poisonous friend, to the point that you would wonder why you would actually be friends with him. But I guess we can talk about Elpho first, since he's introduced after Bean. Anyway, he honestly wants to experience the world, probably because now he's been, spoiler alert, shown to be a half-breed. He of some sort of an elf and someone else. He probably realizes, besides being unhappy with mandatory happiness, he probably recognizes this is not normal. He, again, also, like Lucy and Bean, are interested in sex. He, on the other hand, wants at least some form of monogamy. He was interested in Kissy, who was slightly taller than him without his hat, and he likes Bean. But he's also a deconstruction of the nice guy friend, who, without any real warning, was kind of pushed as if he and Bean would be a good relationship, or at least he wants a relationship with Bean despite knowing her for maybe a month. Neither of them really know each other very well, and he's learning how to show more of his emotions, at least in a healthy way. A lot of criticism is that being brash to get out of the village, he's dumbed down to be a happy-go-lucky elf. But I think that's the point. He's still learning how to be justifiably mad and sad and happy and everything in between. So he still has some of that brainwashing going on. You don't just snap out of it after leaving your village or your place of indoctrination. It takes months, years. And the ninth episode, Elfo mentions when he's wondering how Kissy had a baby, supposedly while he was gone, that he's only been gone for a few months, apparently as long as summer, lampshading on when this came out. So he's still learning, but in the words of Bean, compared to his village, he is a badass. And him trying to constantly force this relationship on Bean, like when he said he just wanted to control her, like her dad, and because he loves her, it shows that that's not how you positively get things done or start a relationship, which is probably maybe how he did things with Kissy, but not with Bean. And he has to examine, what do I really want out of life? When he finds out, another spoiler alert, he's not an elf. Man, Elfo is a spoiler elf. Well, at least he's a half elf. That's probably why, and yet his blood is still magical enough to turn Merkimer into a pig mixed with some pig blood. So why in the world would he be considered not an elf? Well, it's probably based on like the race thing. A lot of things mixed in with elves is turned into a race thing. I've noticed that in the ninth episode. Like, apparently they don't like tall people. They don't like, of course, no one would like a demon. And they don't really like humans. Probably maybe on the stereotype of humans, like always hunting them for their blood, or stealing their cookies or their Lucky Charms or anything, and just being terrible. And if he mentioned that they were from Dreamland, which they've mentioned has been a tyrannical place in regards to war and Dankmire, that we can build a canal, then honestly, yeah, they would not like it. Or they would say, like, she's too big, her fat self broke the bridge. Probably because they designed the bridge with no other races in mind, so it's kind of hoisted on their own petard. Elfo is also steadily learning to have like a frenemy relationship with Lucy, which is deconstructed that they don't really get along. They more or less get along for the sake of Bean. Since Elfo represents the hope and the goodness of the world, and more realistically, yes, there's bad stuff, but you can always find a brighter side and things to do. And Lucy represents the darker side and the despair you could very easily fall into. The interesting thing is that Bean is not noticeably shown to be corrupted. She's already been corrupted, quote unquote, since her mother died. But it's also established later on that the king didn't actually raise her. He claimed he did when he had time, which I'm assuming not a lot, since he constantly just screams at her to be better, but she doesn't know how to be better. She's just given a lot of expectations from a society, but not a way to actually improve upon herself. And Lucy she's already been shown to pretty much be corrupted. She, at 19, is an alcoholic, because there's probably no legal drinking age here. She is shown to be reckless. She is shown to do whatever she wants. She can break out of her castle, and we don't know where she got her clothes, so either she stole them or maybe she sewed them together, which will be another fairy tale attribute, princess role of hers, that she would be taught as a noblewoman that's never touched upon. And she's, besides being resourceful, she's also used to being in chains and shackles, and not to be kidnapped, but just to be brought back to the palace. She also has enough agency later on coming through the, not through work, as you watch subtly throughout the show, she, not just for her friends, she finds things to fight for, like to defend her castle and home and her kingdom from the land Vikings, or going on several quests just to fulfill her promises to her father, his promises not to kill Elfo or the residential wizard guy whose name escapes me, just for elf blood, and also to just make things right. She's a warrior princess, but she doesn't know how to apply her gifts. Usually in a lot of stories she would know how to apply them, but she doesn't, and I am talking a lot about Bean. I'm sorry, she is my favorite out of the initial three. And Lucy, as the poisonous friend, yes, you can see him poisoning her, but she was already poisoned, since she'd already, like a lot of kids who would be neglected by their parents, she's already learned how to get in trouble, usually has some bad influences, as she tries to drink away all her feelings and pain, because, as she said, he gave her daddy issues. All Lucy really does is chip away at the smaller amount of her conscience that she already had. As he mentioned, he's the voice that yells over her conscience to do all the bad stuff, like giving her communion wine at her wedding, or giving her wine before the summit and getting her totally drunk, or convincing her to go on a high speed carriage chase and then well, that actually was her idea to steal drugs from her stepmom. And then as they were high, were susceptible to get to being told, "Hey, let's steal a royal vault." Steal from a royal vault, including her grandma, who I'm assuming also helped raise her up until she passed away after her mother died. Says Bean was about 4 years old when all this happened. While the dark forces sent him to corrupt her, I think she was pretty much on her way. There weren't any shining spots in her life, like a lover or a purpose for her to, other than just saying, "I don't want to do this." She doesn't have really a reason to not say, "Hey, let's go on with this demon." And it seems like Bean, even with all her drinking buddies, didn't have really close friends until Elfo and Lucy came along. And Lucy constantly mentions being in hell and just being a regular poisonous friend, like how lemons are given to children in hell, or shouting over her to do terrible, terrible things, even when he's being exonerized from her body. It showed that he's a somewhat noble demon, and it's probably that somewhat normal demonism that's supposed to make us say, "Hey, he should be with her all the time, and they're great friends." It's probably because she's so desperate for friends, and excuse me, not just desperate, not just desperate for friends. It's just that he's one of the few that's actually been around the castle. Like, she's established she's not a virgin. Probably every guy friend or male friend or romance interest that hasn't been sanctioned by her father has probably had their head chopped off. She's probably been isolated in the castle her whole life, probably in her tower bedroom. That she's not really good at like fully socializing enough to have friendships. I think maybe like in season 2, maybe Big Joe could help with with the rescue of just everybody, because then she would need to meet some outside people like her and the witch sisters, which I'm very glad the one in the attic actually survived. Just so glad. I was afraid she'd go out like Lady Lingonberry. But even as the poisonous friend, Lucy is known enough to at least try and help Bean, even if what he's doing is counter to what his summoners wanted him to do. And he actually, I'm pretty sure he was going to kill that whole posse of knights to figure out who shot Elfo in the back. Because literally they had no reason to shoot that last arrow, unless like it was caught in the bow. And I'm glad we at least got to see the Elf Village one last time. Especially since we got some follow-ups. I'd still ship Elfo and Kissy. And at least be a bit more accepting of other emotions. And apparently they really like drugs and... not marijuana, I'm sorry. Drugs and alcohol for a place that seems to like, oh, that's right. Probably because they're more of a hedonism. They're typically childish hedonism centric place, since Candy and like Elfo and Kissy having sex a lot, which establishes that does happen in that world. It would be a place of hedonism and would be appropriate for alcohol and drugs. Now, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, the couple in episode 1 who were insulted by Elfo complimenting their cooking, they honestly probably thought he was very rich or very delusional when he mentioned that he was constantly eating candy for most of his life. Well, yeah, in the Middle Ages, sugar was high. Just so expensive. You'd have to be very rich to continuously eat a diet of candy and sugar all day long. That's why, that actually kind of ties into why the wedding cakes are white now. When it was only when Queen Victoria had them. Originally, wedding cakes, sorry to go off on a tangent. Originally, wedding cakes were just random cakes that didn't really have a lot of sugar and stuff, or it'd be sweetened with other things like maybe honey or fruit, or maybe boiled raisins. It's a very good process. If you want to learn more, listen to like wedding cake podcast from stuff you missed in history class, or like the Queen Victoria episode of History Chicks. Both podcasts I deeply love, and they do not sponsor this video in any way. But it wasn't until Queen Victoria, just to show how rich you are, she had a entirely white cake made of sugar, and of course wearing a white dress. which again, being married didn't actually completely signify virginism until Queen Victoria did it, and the church heard about that and twisted the meaning so that more people would come, depending on which faction, if you were Protestant or Catholic, and it just kind of stuck. So it gives more reason for people to demoralize women. Again, what Bean was saying, that she had to pretend to be a virgin for this wedding. Duh. And them constantly saying, "Oh, well, I used to eat all this candy stuff." Again, it's made by magic. They're not a rich country at all, since they're constantly eating candy and making candy to earn candy. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. It could also be established that while Lucy knows what he wants to do, essentially his greatest goal is to replace all the diseases in mankind with worse ones, or to just corrupt Bean. He's more of a passive demon. Yes, he does mostly give her alcohol and let the situation play out on its own. But he's also seen just kind of hanging around the castle, and no one can really identify him as a demon except for Big Joe. I don't know why they all think he's a cat. Maybe because he's constantly acting like a sassy cat. Sassy cat, full of sass, full of sass. If you don't like it, you can kiss her butt. And let me know in the comments if you know the reference to that, where that song is from. Now with Queen Una of Dankmeyer and Queen Zog, who like, I hate him so much, almost as much as Merkimer. He is pretty much doing what you would do in medieval times. The kings may have like a bunch of wives, and maybe just to have, again, that spare with Derek. She was sent to broker peace, but she doesn't really do much. She may talk to her husband. They've been seen having sex a couple times, but she doesn't do much around the castle, and it doesn't seem like she really interacts with the people. Excuse me. I don't think she's evil. I found it interesting that she was evidently taking some drugs to quote unquote mellow out with snake root, but it would be interesting to see her and Bean interact a lot more and explain like why their relationship is so antagonistic. Well, passively antagonistic on Una's fault. Not even antagonistic. She just is very blasé, which is kind of sad. This is supposed to be a feminist escape thing, because we don't really see it from. What if it was like 3 generations point of view? The elderly grandmother queen, if she was still alive, to kind of dictate if this was Zog, since he's shown to be a poor ruler, like a lot of different queen mothers, she may have to speak through her son to rule the kingdom. And he could be seen, as we've seen before, a mother's boy, even in passing after her death. Understandably, she could have helped rule the kingdom with him, since he's supposed to be the spare, and he's not really equipped for that. Again, also a thing of medieval lore. Not both princes are going to be trained in the real arts. You can see that with Queen Elizabeth II's father. Like if you've watched The Crown, and if you know of her history, you'll know that he was not originally supposed to be king. It was supposed to be his brother, but he met a woman named what is her name? Wallis Simpson, who was his mistress, and she was married to like her second husband, who she was the mistress of originally. And originally thought, okay, well, he's gonna be king. He can't have me as a mistress anymore. Instead, he abdicated the throne, gave it to his younger brother, who was not trained for this, and ran off with Wallis, and did not fully comprehend what he had done, that he cannot be in political matters anymore, until he was just told straight to his face the entire family disowned him and Wallis, and Wallis did not expect this at all. Just at all. So, and they were very happily married for the rest of their lives. And then later on with Elizabeth, they also did not, since they only had two daughters, her and her sister, they did not plan on teaching her how to be king. Even though they had no male heirs, even when she got married, and they didn't fully expect her husband to rule all preceding matters, until her father finally actually died suddenly, and she was given the crown and told to rule a kingdom on her own. So while he's also a very poor ruler since he was never trained for it, and Una doesn't really have a say in it because, quote, she's Erkidur, the queen consort. The most she got to do was maybe in the finale where she got to pretty much also another thing queens had to do. They had to find their own ways to escape and get back to their roots sometimes, or at least try and get them and their sons out of there, maybe as a bargaining chip, so that the king does not chop off their head, as in like King Henry VIII. Or maybe they would have been blamed if they didn't have a son. I'm not surprised when wherever she left, she didn't take Derek with her, but I guess because it would be too suspicious. And if they go back to Dagmar, they would notice, since that terrible speech Zog honestly had his son give at the dinner, and everyone had been insulted, and they may not be able to go back in the best hopes unless Una explains, I have been cast aside by our supposed allies, and we may have to go to war or turn our backs on Dreamland. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Well, Derek being very infantile because he's been sheltered all his life. So he would be in a crossroads between being a true Dankmarian and a true Dreamlandian if he actually left the Hallowed Halls, because he's always seen either with his parents or in his room playing. And I hope he gets the psychological help that he needed, but I don't think so. Probably because his parents did not fully think it was necessary, which unfortunately mental illness ran rampant amongst royal people. It's also poignant when Elfo was called by Tess a dick, because he was. It lampshades how like a bunch of sitcoms, usually when the characters do something terrible, they just have to say, I'm sorry, and they're all forgiven. And this show, no, it is not forgiven. In fact, it's constantly kept in continuity, which I like. And them going on these little adventures just shows, hey, it's something to do, but it's not our life's purpose. And we're still trying to figure ourselves out, all three of them. And trying to give yourself to a rigid stereotype all your life is not helping. And sometimes you need to drown it with a giant grog of booze. Well, anyway, that's my summary. I'll let you guys know if I think of anything else. And I hope you like watching these pictures. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. And consider becoming one of my patrons, where I have a bunch of different stuff to share. Like, you can win something knitted that I make, or your name gets to be shown in one of my comics or videos or some of the cartoons. Or like in the background, or if you can submit something, that'd be great. Like suggest something. Thanks for watching, and please check out some of the videos below. Bye. One last thing. I forgot. So, it's a spoiler alert about Queen Dagmar. If you really read between the lines, Zog never knew his wife. Just besides the fact that she was evil, Adoy, he put her so high on a pedestal that he ignored the unsavory parts of her. Like when he said that her favorite breakfast was like stereotypical girly stuff, rainbow bacon and dragon eggs and waffles. She and Bean are pretty much alcoholics. Like she even mentions, if you are my daughter, you will drink yourself to death soon enough. She really liked her alcohol, and she was chugging it back and seemed to be more of a party girl. The only thing is she kept it more well hidden. She was essentially Bean with a ladylike veneer. You can tell she's very snarky. She's not. I mean, she's pretty and proper, of course, but she's also kind of vulgar. She's flashy with her fireworks and her small party, as it will do. She's more than willing to get into a cat fight, like Bean. Like I also loved how the second episode ended with a king fight, and the last episode ended with at least had a queen fight, which Una unfortunately does not get metaphors, or honestly thought she was being insulted because reptiles and birds constantly being compared to one another, of course, like it would. And Dagmar, even if the king honestly thought because she was a beautiful woman who was ladylike, she probably learned how to play the system. Like if you were Eleanor Aquitaine, another queen of the kings of Nottingham that would eventually become the basis of the villains for Robin Hood, you would be rich, you would at least be well trained in the arts and diplomacy, and probably given more to do, as she knows how to play the game, but she's also a foul mouthed, um, drunken person who just keeps it under a very nice veneer. And the way that she and Bean immediately connect, not just to get her out of the castle and get her trust, but also to show, hey, there's a place for us in the world. You're not, your father's trying to change you into this rigid archetype, and I can tell you there's a different side of you. You just have to learn how to play the PR game. Like how they constantly rode horses, even if stereotypically women were told don't do that because it'll rupture your uterus. Or they're kind of death seekers and they like to party. Like so hard. We haven't seen enough of Queen Dagmar besides knowing, I don't know if she got poisoned from the poison shop, or maybe she or maybe she made it herself. It seems very much that she's into alchemy, which is interesting. I know it's a stereotype of the evil queen to be into alchemy and wizardry and science, but it would explain where she got the poison from. And she mentioned probably she aged badly in those 15 years because she can't read the small print on her bottles, and she knows all the secret passageway of the manor. And she also knew how to twist everything so it looks like Una is the bad person. She may have been stirring up conflict on purpose because she was the beloved queen and clearly intended to raise Bean as a queen regent, which is different from a queen consort. Una is the consort. She's more than willing to just stay by her husband's side and sit silently. She is the trophy wife of royalty. Queen Regent is, on the other hand, like the sole queen. Like if you would see some stories like in not Donkey Skin, I'm sorry, in the Goose Girl, then she would be where the protagonist is like the product of a single mother after her father passed away when she was young. Then that they're the only ones running the kingdom. They never remarried. They have a chance to possibly or get more land or riches, but they never do. So think of Queen Dagmar. Her essentially she's like the bad feminist version of these events. She's essentially Elsa is a queen regent, and Cinderella would be, if as long as the prince doesn't have any other cousins or stuff with or uncles to the right to the throne, she would be queen consort. But Dagmar is an interesting character, and it seems like her kingdom is much more diverse than Dreamland, at least her home kingdom or where she's from, because on that ship that they were leaving, there were a bunch of pigs, goats, and magical creatures that claimed the crew, which means she has been playing this for a while. So, how is it going to go? Now that most of Dreamland has been petrified and gluified, which, again, how did Zog not know any of this was happening? Again, he was just so blind to all faults to make her the perfect, classy Dane queen, which means Bean will be an excellent successor to Queen Dagmar. And as far as I know, we could have a posse with Elfo being scooped up. We could have Big Tess. I'm sorry, not Big Tess. I'm sorry. With Tess, maybe enemy mine with Big Joe, because it seems like he may have stolen Lucy, and the Griffin and the Witch Sisters, and maybe even some villagers that actually escaped the gooey. I know Una and Derek are probably still around, and it would all be led by Queen Zog, since he supposedly had a lot of good real back in the day. He was a blood prince, but I don't think he was a good king or father. Which, if you looked at a lot of royal backgrounds, their fatherhood was their royal parents. A lot of royal parents were terrible, usually leaving the kids alone, and a lot of them, yes, also developed. Usually, the males usually developed a terrible drinking problem at like age 9 or 10, or again would also be into gambling, which aided them, or partying or having a lot of mistresses, which again was a big thing in royalty and even in like a bunch of political things now. So the air of things being so dignified has never actually been true. It's more of a PR game for hundreds and thousands of years. So if you were looking for historical fairy tale stuff, you did not come to the right show. Disenchantment is smarter, like Futurama, is smarter than you think if you actually look at the research. It's based more on both historical accurate, not historical actually, but kind of lampshading both on like what royalty wanted things to be and what mythology claims everything is supposed to be. It's based on PR. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.
Now every year about July when summertime comes round, there's lots and lots of people at the seaside to be found. Some play golf or tennis, others like to take a rest. But here's the kind of exercise that I enjoy the best when I go swimming with the women. Here I do have a real good time, bobbing up and down in the water. It comes just below me, some Dixie line, to see them do